Okay, hi Rami, hi Martin. Thank you so much
Hey.
for joining me here today on Vonvo.com. The date is February 10th. I just wanted to go over two quick rules before we get started. The first is that just so you
You're
know,
incoherent again, Max.
do you hear me okay, Martin?
When you ask me if I hear you, I hear you. But once you start talking, you become a little bit incoherent. Let's carry on and let's see how it works out.
Okay, great. Just two rules to go over to start. The first is that right now this conversation is being recorded, and after the recording and the discussion is finished, I'll be posting the discussion to YouTube. Is that okay with both of you?
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. And then next thing is just because here at Vonvo we're all about our discussions being valuable. We want the discussion to stay civil, and we don't want there to be any personal attacks against one another. Are you guys fine with those ground rules?
That's fine with me.
Great.
Agreed by me.
Okay, great. So we're here to discuss solutions to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Before we get started, could we each give one another and our listeners a quick background of yourself so that our viewers know who's actually speaking? So, Rami, if you want to just start, tell people who you are, and then Martin, you could go ahead right afterwards.
So, I'm Rami. I'm a pro-Palestinian activist. I'm actually a Palestinian living in a city called Lid, which is 5 minutes from the Israeli International Airport. I'm an active within a group called Khutwah, which means a step in Arabic, and we've been active for the past 4 years now. And as of from today, I'm also a proud uncle. So,
Great.
a very interesting day for me.
Very nice.
Sorry, I didn't hear the last part. I didn't hear the last part of Rami's introduction of himself. An uncle.
I said today an uncle. Just became an uncle today. So,
great.
An uncle?
Yeah, uncle.
Not very valuable for the discussion. So, yeah.
Well, okay. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, and Martin, yourself?
Well, I was born in South Africa. I've been living in Israel since the early 1970s. I served in the Israeli Defense Establishment for a number of years. I have degrees in physics and geology, in business administration, and a doctorate in political science and international relations. To cut a long story short, I'm now the founder and chief executive officer of a new entity that I founded called the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, whose main brief is to advance values shared by the United States and Israel as is reflected in the Declaration of Independence of Israel and the Constitution of the United States.
Okay, great. So, we're here to discuss solutions. And so what I wanted to ask, each of you, and Rami, we could start with you. Overall, when it comes to this conflict, what are the immediate, barriers or blockades, that are, preventing any sort of, whether it's one state or two state, any sort of overall solution occurring between, both peoples? Can you give us your take on just that matter, defining first the problem here?
Yeah, it's hard to divide barriers between immediate and others. In general, we look at the whole problem as a whole. We don't have just immediate barriers. We have permanent barriers that prevent peace from occurring in here. For instance, we still have the separation wall built between the West Bank and the Israeli territories, the 48 borders. I don't know if you have visited Palestine, or maybe the viewers have visited Palestine, but it's like a 12 meters wall and I don't see any solution being, happening with that kind of thing. There's also the Jerusalem issue. I mean, if recently elected Yair Lapid, if the viewers are familiar with the Israeli politics, was considered to be center and left, just recently said that Jerusalem will never be divided. It will stay the whole capital of the Israeli people, regardless of the Palestinians and their wishes and their aspirations. So that's another issue. Of course, we still have my biggest concern is the refugees. I, for one, I'm speaking for myself. I have a family in Lebanon. I have a family in Jordan. I have a family in the U.S. I have a family in Europe, and they're all refugees, and I want them back. I want them back, and they were expelled in 48, and they have the right to return, and Israel doesn't recognize their right. And we still haven't spoken about Gaza, about the situation. We have a siege in Gaza without a quick solution to the Gaza problem, without breaking down the siege. No peace talks, nothing should be going on at the moment. And that's without even mentioning the 48ers, like myself. I have an Israeli passport, I'm an Israeli citizen, I have an Israeli ID card, but I'm not a full equal citizen to the Jews living in Israel, aka Israelis. So these are the barriers as I see them, and they're dividing them into like immediates and other barriers, so I don't think you can really divide them.
Yeah. So Martin, what are your take on some of these different blockades, and perhaps do some of them do you feel the same way on some of the different things that Rami's brought up that maybe are preventing a peace solution here?
Well, it depends on what you mean by a solution. If your point of view is that Israel should remain the nation state of the Jewish people for a long term in the unlimited future, then unfortunately I think it's very clear from the things that Rami has been saying is the only way to reach any form of long-term stability is to completely take issue of Palestinian statehood off the agenda. Because, and I'm saying this as a political scientist, perhaps I should have said in the introduction that I also taught political science for a long time at Tel Aviv University. And so I'm saying this as a political scientist. There is simply no way that you can bring about a stable situation if you divide the sovereignty between the river and the sea. You must understand that from the territory designated for a Palestinian state, you control completely in terms of firepower, observation, electronic surveillance, the entire center of Israel. That means all airfields, civilian and military, including Israel's only international airport, all its major cities, its seaports, its major infrastructure installations and systems, including power stations and water conveyance, and 80% of Israel's civilian population and commercial activity. All of this will be in range of weapons being used today from Egypt to the Palestinians and other Arab regimes. This can no longer be dismissed as right-wing scaremongering. This is the empirical precedent. And so I think that anyone who has the point of departure that Israel should remain long-term nation state of the Jewish people must find a claim for Palestinian statehood a complete eclipse of common sense. Because this is a claim, not because I say so, because the Palestinians say so themselves in their deeds and their documents, that it's all a giant hoax. I don't want to monopolize the discussion, but we go into detail later. The Palestinians themselves admit that the Palestinian state is merely an interim step to eliminating Jewish independence. So again, it depends what you mean by a solution.
Well,
I don't think there's any solution that can be achieved by dividing sovereignty between the sea.
Okay.
Can I
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah. Go ahead, Rami.
I actually have something very surprising to say. I actually agree with Martin on the conclusion. I just don't agree with him on the reasons that led him to this conclusion. I don't want a Palestinian state within the 67 borders. No. You said that if such a state will eventually exist, then Israel, whole of Israel, will be within weapons range. Well, that's a scare tactic Israeli regimes have used and have been using for decades. So what I want to say is, all of Israel is within weapon range. Okay, so this is not a new thing. You can't now claim that if Palestine, if the Palestinians have their independence, if they do establish their state in the 67 borders, then they will be able to shoot firearms at all of this. This is not an acceptable, argument. I don't.
Excuse me. Every bit of territory that's been ceded to the Palestinians has become a platform for firing at Israeli civilians. It's not a scare tactic. It's just the empirical precedent.
Guys, Martin,
I want to finish my comment.
Yeah, finish your comment, Rami and Martin, just so that the video itself, the video stays, clean. In terms of people not talking over one another. Let's just speak one at a time. Rami, finish your point, and then Martin, you can respond.
Well, I was saying that every territory that was given to the Israelis became a military place. And every territory that was given to the Israelis, it doesn't take a political scientist to go and visit settlements within the West Bank. See how the army guards them. See how settlers go and harass Palestinians on a daily basis with the Israeli soldiers just standing and watching and protecting them. Protecting the settlers, of course, the Israeli settlers. So claiming that every land that was given to the Palestinians will be dangerous for Israel is not actually an empirical state. It's not a real argument, because we see otherwise. We see just the opposite happening. So I just want to finish my point regarding the Palestinian state. I want a Palestinian state. I don't want a Palestinian state within the 67 borders. I want a whole state. I don't care what you call it, Israel, Palestine. I just want one country, one state. This is a very, very, very leftist idea. I just want a whole place, space, equal from the river to the sea, to all nations, all people of all color, of all races. That's my final solution. This is why I don't want. Yeah.
Yeah, great. No, I hear exactly what you're saying. Martin, go ahead and respond.
Well, first of all, as I say, to dismiss what I'm saying as scare tactics is to fly in the face of facts. Every time Israel has withdrawn from territory, it's been used as a base to fire on Israeli civilian centers. This is not a scare tactic. This is just the empirical precedent. This has happened every single time. And to say it's a scare tactic is not to contend with the facts. The truth of the matter is that Israeli settlements or Israeli communities across the Green Line are guarded precisely because they need to be, otherwise their inhabitants would be murdered by the Palestinians. And, whilst there might be a few incidents of inappropriate harassment of Palestinians by the settlers, I would urge anyone to compare the number of Arabs, Palestinians injured or killed by Israeli settlers and the number of Israeli settlers killed by Palestinian terrorists. Not only Israeli settlers, but Israeli civilians inside the Green Line. So to make the comparison between the actions of terrorist organizations whose aim is the specific destruction of the Jewish state, and in some cases the Jews, for instance, in the Hamas charter, which is not only against Israel but against the Jews. To make that kind of comparison between alleged damage to olive trees offences, in my opinion, is completely absurd. But I must thank Rami for his candor, because basically because what
more examples. You want to hear more examples? I'm not talking about olive oil.
I can give you examples.
Let me give you
examples. Examples won't change the principle.
Last month, 4 Palestinians were killed last month. One was a 17-year-old kid, went to the store to buy a cake to celebrate his birthday with his mom. He just went, he was in Hebron, in the old city. He went to buy a cake for his mom. Just because he passed a soldier, and I don't know, she looked at him funny, he looked at her funny, I don't know what happened, she shot him in the face, a 17-year-old. 2 weeks ago, a student in Bethlehem University, 23 years old, a beautiful student, shot dead again in the head. What was she doing? You really think she was about to go murder a settler or something? Let me tell you one more thing. I'm a 48er. We have over 1.5 million 48ers, Palestinians living in Israel. Why don't we go and just, kill people all around us? It doesn't happen. This is another scare tactic. Okay? You said, let me give you the best example comment about what you just said is the Gaza situation. Israel is like to say that, okay, so we took our settlements outside of Gaza and we handed over Gaza to the Palestinians. And look what happened. They started firing Qassam and I don't know, grads and whatever at the Israeli south. But Israelis, forget very easily that the siege on Gaza never ended.
I can't hear you. You've gone.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, go ahead, Rami.
Yeah.
There's a siege on Gaza. There's hunger in Gaza. There's lack of medicine in Gaza. People can't go outside of Gaza. People are living in complete despair. When people are living in complete despair, with their backs to the wall, then of course they're gonna resist occupation. They're gonna resist the siege. So claiming that every time you hand over land to the Palestinians, they start firing at Israel, there's an occupation going on. This is called resistance to occupation.
Well, Rami, can I ask you just a quick question before Martin jumps in, because it gets brought up all the time, and then yesterday someone made a comment. I mean, is it fair to say that, and I don't want to call it a complete or a partial occupation, but I think someone, made the comment yesterday that yet 50,000 tons, of goods daily go into Gaza. I mean, do you think it's unfair on your side, pro-Palestinian activists, when they sometimes say it's a total, occupation? I mean, do you think that there's some credit to be, is there any sort of credit or, leniency we should be giving Israel when it's trying to secure itself, and so they bring in some supplies, but they feel like they need to restrict some others because they have to, at least be worrisome of, what might be coming in terms of weapons? Do you see Israelis' points when they say that?
Well, Israel destroyed Gaza 4 years ago during the Gaza massacre, the first Gaza massacre. I'm not talking about the second one. It cost billions of dollars to repair the damage Israel has done. The Saudis gave money to the Palestinians who bought the materials from Israel. So Israel like to portray itself as a humane country that helps the Palestinians, but at the end they make money out of it. So I don't want supplies coming to Gaza from the Israeli border, and because Israel makes money out of it. Regarding the leniency, regarding the whole situation, that and the claim that Israel wants to secure the safety of the residents of the South, killing kids and killing women and bombarding everywhere in Gaza won't bring stability. Ending the siege will.
Right.
Are you with us, Max?
Yeah. I'm
well,
with you.
let me respond to that. I don't want to argue about the details of every single incident that I don't really have all the details of myself.
Martin, you don't hear about these incidents in Western media.
But looking at the larger picture, siege in Gaza is not the reason Arab aggression or Palestinian aggression against Israel. The siege is a response to Arab aggression. If it hadn't been for the siege, many more Israelis would have been massacred by the terrorist organizations that have taken over the Gaza Strip. And if Israel were to withdraw from Judea and Samaria, they would take over that area as well, and turn the whole of Judea and Samaria into a mega Gaza overlooking the eastern fringes of Tel Aviv. But
why do you keep calling?
Go ahead, Rami. Ask your question. Ask him a question.
I just want to ask a question. Yeah. Why do you keep calling the Palestinian organizations terror organizations?
How else would you characterize organizations that deliberately target civilians for political aim? That's the most. Well, you see, what I was going to say is what I find most offensive is that what I consider the epitome of racism is to brand, or basically to expect the Jews to die meekly. That in my opinion, is the epitome of racism, because basically what it entails is to brand every coercive action that Israel takes to protect its citizens against attacks that are being launched against them just because they're Jewish, to brand those coercive actions as war crimes, as aggression, as slaughter. Israel, the IDF, has the best record when minimizing collateral damage. I really suggest that anyone who accuses the IDF of wanton slaughter of civilians to have a look at the way NATO bombed Kosovo and Serbia during the Balkan War, or the way that NATO forces acted in Afghanistan. So I'm not talking about comparing the IDF to other armies of dictatorships. I'm comparing the IDF conduct to the cream of the Western democracies of NATO itself. So basically what Rami is saying is that Jews should not defend themselves. They should die meekly.
Okay, why do I say Israelis and you say Jews? Why do you choose to say Jews when I'm talking about Israelis?
I'll tell you exactly why, Rami. Because, for instance, in the Lebanese Lebanese war, when the Hezbollah rockets went astray and hit Arab villages, who did the Israeli citizens, Arab citizens who were hurt, blame? Not the Hezbollah, Israel.
They were Palestinians. They were Palestinians. Say they were Palestinians. Of course they blamed Israel. Of course they blamed Israel. And I do blame Israel for the Hezbollah.
Why? They blame Israel for the Hezbollah shelling Arab villages in the Galilee?
I'm sorry, I just want to comment about what you said before. You keep saying Palestinians want to murder Jews. That's inaccurate. That's completely out of line. And that, sir, is a racist claim, because you said that Palestinians resist occupation because they are racist. I'm sorry, sir, but in no universe.
No, I didn't say that. Sorry, I didn't say that.
You just said it. I wrote it down. You just said it.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say the Palestinians resist occupation. I said what you do is you brand every coercive action that Israel takes to defend its citizens as slaughter, as war crimes, as disproportionate. Every time Israel has to defend its citizens against attacks which are aimed at them just because they are Jewish, then those actions are branded as war crimes.
That's unacceptable.
Sorry?
That's unacceptable.
What's not acceptable?
You're not turning this conflict into an anti-Semitism thing. No, don't go there. This is another tactic. This is another Israeli tactic. This is another Israeli. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, guys?
I hear you fine. Just slow, Rami. Slow down when you're speaking. Talk slower. I think that will help. And
I'm sorry. I'll try and talk slowly. Don't go there. don't try and make this into an anti-Semitist kind of thing. Okay, this is a conflict between Israelis and Palestinians, not between Jews and Muslims. You'd like the world to think that because of the whole hatred towards Muslims at the moment, but truth of the matter is 15% of
have you read the Hamas Charter?
And they do suffer from Israeli occupation. Okay, and regarding the whole IDF, you call it IDF, I call it the IOF, because in my opinion, it doesn't defend Israel, it just kills Palestinians, Lebanese, and Arabs in general. So to us, it's the IOF, not the IDF, and to us, it's a terrorist organization. I don't care you call it an army. Okay, you can go and call, let's say, Al Qaeda an army. Does that make them okay? Of course not. So to us, the whole PLO have never been a terrorist organization.
Rami, unfortunately,
don't ever blame the oppressed. Blame the oppressor. This is what we do.
Unfortunately, I'm old enough to remember the days before the peace process, when on the weekends there were convoys of Israeli vehicles driving into across the Green Line there in Samaria to buy merchandise from the Arab merchants there. This all came to a shuddering halt as soon as someone decided that it would be a good idea to launch a peace process and brought in the butchers of Arafat who were later displaced or challenged by the extreme Islamists. And if you say why it's something against the Jews, well, I would advise you to have a look at the way the Jews are portrayed in the Palestinian media. Not only the Hamas, but by mainstream Palestinian media as well. There's very little daylight between the way Jews are portrayed there and the ways the Nazis portrayed them in Der Sturmel. But even read the Hamas Charter. The Hamas Charter doesn't talk about Israel. The Hamas Charter says that Israel is unacceptable because it's Jewish. And redemption will not come, quoting the Hadith, that redemption will not come until the Muslims kill every Jew who will be hiding behind trees and rocks. So it's not me. I'm just saying what you guys are saying.
Rami, Rami, I want you to make your point, Rami, but that item kind of gets brought up a lot, and I'm curious if do you see where Israelis and Jews, for that matter, could be feeling apprehensive, scared, because of seeing like documentation like that? Do you kind of see where they're coming from with that? I mean, obviously, yeah, go ahead.
A recent study, and actually Martin's a reporter, so I think he read that in Haaretz, which is an Israeli newspaper. A recent study showed that a research funded by the U.S. administration regarding the the books being taught in the Palestinian Authority and within the Israeli Ministry of Tourism show no big differences, no real difference between how the other side is portrayed, Palestinians portray the Israelis as occupiers, as terrorists. Well, let me break it down for you. This is a big news flash. So the same in Israeli books. Okay, and this was in Haaretz. This was published in Haaretz a couple of days ago. I think it was last Friday. I still have the newspaper downstairs. You can go online and pick it up. Okay, so regarding the whole books and how they teach their children, and let me tell you one more thing. I'll answer the question in a minute, Max. You're saying that if we want Israel to prosper and stay the homeland of the Jewish people, you keep saying that sentence, and you said that in different variations 3 or 4 times. I'm sorry, but this is a very racist claim. You have 2 million citizens, Muslims, most of them are Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, Druzes. We're not Jewish. Okay? And we live here. So what do you think we should do? You say that Israel should be a Jewish state. But I'm sorry, in a Jewish state, there's no existence for me. I don't want a Jewish state. I want a democratic state. And the whole conflict between Jewish and democratic is seen very closely in mixed cities in Israel. I come from Lod. Do you know where Lod is, Martin? 5 minutes from the airport.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure,
Have you ever been to the Arab? Have you ever been to the Arab neighborhoods in Lod?
I've been through it. Yeah.
It's called apartheid.
Who's to blame for that?
When you go, it's called
No,
apartheid.
it's not called apartheid. It's called bad management. Bad management by community leaders.
There's an apartheid wall separating the two. Okay, separating the two neighborhoods. Just go see the Arab neighborhoods. Sewage everywhere, kids running on the street, no playgrounds, no schools, nothing. Drugs everywhere. These are the Arab neighborhoods. And go see the Jewish neighborhoods, the Israeli neighborhoods. I don't want to say Jewish. Go see the Israeli neighborhoods and see how they run. So, saying Israel is a Jewish state is unacceptable. This is not a solution. This is a very racist solution. It's unacceptable by us and by all Palestinians. And you asked me something, Max, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just, I asked you a question regarding, like the Hamas charter that, people who are pro-Israeli will bring up, and they'll say, it calls for destruction of Israel. Their flag, represents just, a whole a whole Palestinian state, basically of the current Israeli borders, let's say. And it says,
I don't support.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't support any declaration. I'm a leftist by nature. I don't support any violent declarations. Okay, I don't want to wipe Israelis. I don't want to throw anyone to the sea. I want in harmony and peace with Israel. If Hamas leaders say that, I don't support that. Okay, that's just to make it. But recently, I think it was last week, Khalid Mash'al, one of the leaders, the leader of Hamas actually, said that he supports negotiation with Israel. And this is not something not to be overlooked. So changes do happen, okay? And I think the Hamas leaders know as well that they can't really fight Israel, army versus army, because to be honest, I don't think it's really fair. So nobody wants. I'm talking on my behalf, and I'm talking about on 90% of the Palestinians' behalf. Nobody wants the destruction of Israel. This is not true.
Right. So here's okay. So that's great. And I appreciate you answering that, Rami, because it gets brought up very often.
Sorry, guys, I've lost you.
Yeah, Martin, do you hear me?
I've lost you guys.
Martin, do you hear me right now?
I can hear you now. I'm a bit broken up.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. A bit broken up, but I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. So what I was gonna say is,
Yeah. Well, in response to what Rami just said, I know about the study that was published in the United States. It's a study which, of course, should be treated with the ridicule it richly deserves. I would challenge anyone to go online, say to the Palestinian Media Watch, and look at what Palestinians' children are inundated with, and I would challenge them to find anything that even comes remotely close to that in the Israeli education system. Israeli scholars or school kids are educated in democracy and peace. In my opinion, in much of the education system, in fact, beautifies the realities much more and avoids much of the harshness that there is in the Israeli situation. It tries to sugarcoat it, but to draw any comparison between the two educational systems is symptomatic of the distortion of the whole discussion on the conflict. But coming back to what Rami said, and I thank him for his candor, because basically what he's saying is that the Jews, who are probably more distinct than any other people in the world, don't deserve their own state. They have probably more distinctive features, whether it's a distinct religion, a distinct script, a distinct history, a distinct religion, etc., etc. by any standards which normally are taken to justify a claim for national self-determination, the Jews probably have the strongest case in the world. And to come and say, well, you know, we should deny them that right, I think is the epitome of racism. When it comes to democracy, I would challenge Rami to open up an atlas and look at the Arab world from Algeria, across North Africa, to the Persian Gulf, and find me one example of an Arab state which is in any way consistent with the theory that an Arab state, Arab majority state, would be democratic. Now, I don't know what the reason for is, but there just aren't any.
I'm sorry, Martin.
Sorry?
Did you just compare Israel with third world countries?
No, I'm comparing it to what you want to turn it into.
No, you just did. Just said
I didn't. I didn't. I said you want this country to.
Rami, go ahead and say what you thought, you know, Martin was just stating, but then I want to, you know, go into solutions from there. But go ahead, Rami.
I wanna go into solutions. I just want to comment on a couple of the arguments Martin's mentioned. I've mentioned this before. I don't like when you turn the argument into, you know, Palestinians versus Jews. I don't like that. You said that you want people to go and open Palestinian books, school books, and see what Palestinians teach their kids. Well, I would advise everyone to just talk to an Israeli. You know, there are many Israeli travelers abroad. Whenever you meet an Israeli traveler, usually he or she are after an army service. Okay, Israeli kids live in a militarized community. Okay, society. Since school, so I think it's since the 11th year, they're being prepared to go to the Israeli army.
I've lost you guys.
Hold on M16.
Yes.
And practice their standing in checkpoints. This is one. Okay, I didn't say Jews don't deserve their own state. Of course they do deserve. I think that all people, including Palestinians, deserve to have an own state.
Guys, I can't hear anything.
The right for self-determination. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, speak up. Hold your mic up. Hold your mic up to your mouth, Rami, on your right hand.
I can't hear anything.
Martin, do you hear me?
Can you hear me now? I think he has a bad connection.
Yeah.
I can hear you when you lean forward.
Yeah. Lean forward, Rami, and put the mic up to your mouth when you're speaking. It's on your right-hand side.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, like that's great. Do that. That's perfect.
Martin, can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, that's fine. So I was saying that all over the world have the right for self-determination, including the Palestinians and including the Jews. I didn't say I don't want Jews to have their own country, but just so happened when they decided to have a country, they took my people's land. Okay? So, let's all learn to live in harmony and peace and all that, and let's divide this land. Not divide this land, let's make this land into two people's whole place. And that's the real solution that will be effective and will solve the whole conflict.
So Martin, I wanna go, just because I had asked Rami.
Well, they tried that in Lebanon, and we saw how well that worked out.
Who tried that in Lebanon? Who tried that in Lebanon?
We tried a multi-ethnic state in Lebanon, and we saw how well that worked out.
So are you saying that multi-ethnic states can exist? Like, have you heard about the USA?
Yes, but normally, well, in many ways, I would say that Israel is a multi-ethnic state. If you walk into any classroom at university or at school, by any normal standard of ethnicity, you'll see people from Scandinavia and from the Middle East and from Africa and from all over. So, unless you think Judaism is an ethnicity, you have a very varied population in terms of what's normally considered ethnic characteristics. They all happen to be Jewish, there's a huge amount of tolerance for individual diversity in Israel.
The equation is very simple, Martin. Give people their rights, give them their freedom, make justice. They have no reason to fight anymore. This is very simple. This has been happening for thousands of years.
Right. So Martin, okay. Martin, can I ask you a question, Martin?
Okay.
Martin, can I ask you a question?
No, well, yeah.
My question is
I can't hear you. Max.
Do you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. My question is.
I can hear you, Max, but now you've gone away. Yeah.
Okay. Rami brought up earlier the idea behind a militarized society, and I wanted to ask you: do you think the fact that Israeli children, they're born and then they're raised and they know that they're going into the army, like
sorry, Max, I can't hear your question. I can't hear your question, Max.
Do you hear me now?
Max, I can't hear your question.
Do you hear me now? Rami,
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, Rami, do you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you fine, guys.
Okay. What I was just going to say is, Martin, the idea that children are raised in Israel knowing that they're going into the army and it has this kind of militaristic, feel to growing up in Israel, do you think that is helping or hurting, younger generations, getting older and thinking about a peace solution because of this, militarized, sort of environment that they grow up in underneath, in homes and stuff? What do you think about that, Martin?
Well, sadly, I think I didn't hear all the question, but if I understand correctly, you're asking is the fact that Israeli children grow up knowing that they'll go into the army has created a militarized society. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes.
Well, sadly, in the realities facing Israel, living by the sword may not be the preferred option unless it's compared by dying by the sword. And so the Israeli IDF and the widespread phenomena of enlisting much of the youth into the army is just a matter of necessity. I think most informed people would know that without the IDF, Israel would have been obliterated and the Jewish people slaughtered long ago, as the historical precedent will easily confirm. So, again, it's in my opinion, it's a little deceitful to accuse Israel of being a militarized society when the alternative is being an annihilated society.
Okay. So can we go into some specific questions relative to a solution? I wanted to ask, Martin, or we'll start with Rami because Martin, you just did speak. Rami, what immediate what is the, if you had to say there, if you had to pick one thing that people on the Palestinian end, people who are pro-Palestinian, if you had one thing that you said needed to immediately stop or immediately need to happen in order for a peace solution to take place, what would that one thing be?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I heard you right. You asked in terms of the Palestinian side?
Yeah.
If they need to okay. I think first they need to end the separation between the West Bank and Gaza. The political, separation between Fatah, who now represent the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and Hamas. the fact that there's a Hamas government in Gaza Strip, and there's a Fatah government in the West Bank, and there's us 48ers under Israeli regime in 48, and there's also the refugees who are everywhere worldwide, and we have no real connection to each other. And this is a big problem. I think the first step that's the first step.
Okay,
we
and
need to all unite together.
and what do you think? Then once that first step were to take place, what then do you think would be something that one uniform government or authority would kind of need to be standing for? What is your belief that their principles or values would need to be to then go towards a peace solution, as you call it, a one-state peace solution? What would the next step need to be taken?
The next step would be a popular, non-violent, and I'm emphasizing non-violent struggle. So it's a popular, non-violent struggle. We need to start taking things into our own hands. We can't expect Israeli regime and Israeli authorities to, start peace negotiations and give Palestinian rights and create a just situation. So this is what we need to do. We need to all unite and start people's struggle.
Okay, got it. Martin, so now my question, Martin, do you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so my question to you, Martin, is what on your end do you believe is the one thing that the Israeli government needs to do immediately or stop doing immediately to foster a peace deal? And I'm getting the impression that I don't know, I've yet to actually figure out if you believe in more of a one-state solution or a two-state solution, but you could either maybe just clarify that for me, what you believe in, and then just tell me what is the one immediate step that needs to be taken by the Israeli government to go forward.
Well, first of all, let me say something about what Rami just said. He's talking about this non-violent struggle. And what I've been suggesting for a long time for the Israeli government is to really, if the Palestinians feel they need to be independent, let them be independent. They accuse Israel of besieging them. Well, I suggest that Israel make that siege real and let them fend for themselves. No electricity, no water, no fuel supplies, no postal services, etc., etc. So that we can really gauge how the Palestinians would fend for themselves. But if you ask about the most important thing that I think needs to be attended to from an Israeli point of view, it is to disperse the hoax of the Palestinian refugees. And this really doesn't matter what solution you support, whether it's a one-state solution or a two-state solution or a no-state solution. Because it's quite clear that if all the Palestinian diaspora were to return to a micro-mini Palestinian state, it would implode instantly. Many people don't realize that there's a qualitative difference between the Palestinian refugees and all other refugees on the face of the globe. All the refugees on the face of the globe are under the auspices of an organization called the UN High for Refugees, except the Palestinians. The Palestinians have their own specific organization called UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Work Agency. Now, these two organizations have different definitions of who is a refugee and a different mandate for dealing with refugees. According to the universal definition of the High Commission, the number of refugees goes down over time. According to the definition of Palestinian refugees, the number of refugees balloons over time. According to the universal definition, increases in balloons, goes up over time.
Okay.
According to the universal definition of refugees of the High Commission, you can find permanent solution for refugees in third-party countries, not necessarily their country of origin. According to the UNRWA definition, you can only take care of the humanitarian needs. Now, if you take the UNRWA definition which creates an increasing population, and the UNRWA mandate, which means they can only take care of humanitarian needs, you're quickly forced to the conclusion that UNRWA is an organization that perpetuates the problem that it's supposed to solve. By the way, if you were to apply the universal definition for refugees, which is good for tsunamis and earthquakes and famine and political persecution, and apply it to the Palestinian situation, the number of Palestinian refugees would shrink from the claimed 5 million today to under 50,000. In other words, the whole Palestinian refugee hoax is a matter of definition. So unless that problem is addressed, there's no solution. And it's not only an Israeli-specific problem. It's a general solution. Because if humanity decides that they're going to allot X amount of resources to deal with refugees across the world, why should one group of refugees have an increasing slice of the cake and all the other refugees in the world have a diminishing slice of the cake? It just doesn't make any sense, not practically and not morally. So if you're asking one issue to focus on, that would be the issue.
Okay, and
I just want
a
quick comment, a very quick comment on what Martin just said. I think Martin has proven he's been speaking from a very colonial and imperialist point of view by saying let's let the Palestinians, let's give the Palestinians, or let them. I don't like this terminology, and I think it really shows racism, in my opinion. And he said something about the Palestinian refugees being merely 50,000, under 50,000. He didn't continue that sentence. And you know that refugees of 60 or 70 years grow in numbers. You know that, right? They have kids. And then they have grandkids. They are also refugees. So that...
No, they're not. By no international standards or descendants are not even refugees.
Now I'm talking.
By any standards, except the Palestinians. The Palestinians are only refugees. The Palestinians are the only refugees.
Martin, let Rami finish his point, and then you'll comment. Go ahead, Rami.
You just called the Nakba. You just called the Nakba, the biggest Palestinian disaster, a hoax, and I said nothing. Please don't interrupt me again. So can you hear me, guys?
I hear you fine.
Okay, and by the way, if I were to call the Jewish Holocaust a hoax, I would be behind bars right now. So please show some respect. So do you know what happens in?
I'm not sure what your complaint is. I didn't hear your complaint.
No, I'm saying you called the Palestinian Nakba, okay, the Palestinian biggest disaster and the whole refugee situation. You called it a hoax, and this is very disrespectful to me and to my people. You know what they teach in refugee camps in Lebanon, Mr. Martin? There's a movie called Dreams in Exile. It's a Palestinian Lebanese movie, and it portrays the whole reality in Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, in south of Lebanon. What happens is over there is that the old people, the elderly, gather their grandkids and they show them the keys. They show them the keys for their homes in Palestine, in historic Palestine. They tell them that they may won't be able to return to their homes, but they expect their grandkids to return to their homes. And this is something that your colonial European point of view can't really comprehend, that we don't forget. Okay, people will never forget. If you harm people, they won't overlook that. I mean, you talked about solutions and about solving the whole refugee problem, and you said nothing. You said nothing about what the Palestinian people really want. You talked on and on about the Jewish people right for self-determination. But what about the Palestinians? Are we not as human as Jewish people?
Martin, what's your response to that, Martin?
Response to what?
You know what?
The Palestinian refugee problem was created. The Palestinian refugee problem was created by Arab aggression, an unmitigated, undisguised attempt to obliterate the Jewish state. That was the result. So basically, they had a war, And now they're coming on complaints that they lost the war, that their aggression failed. Now, I didn't say that what Rami calls the Nakba was a hoax. What I said that the hoax is to keep the refugee problem alive, because the refugee problem could have been solved years ago if the Arab countries had allowed Palestinians to absorb in their societies, as many surveys of the Palestinian diaspora prove they want. In fact, Khalil Shaki, the well-known Palestinian pollster, had his office trashed because he produced a survey saying that the Palestinians don't want the right of return. They want to be absorbed in the Arab countries. So this whole issue of a right of return is something that's been put on the Palestinians. In fact, if you're talking about discrimination, some of the harshest discrimination is against Palestinians in the Arab world, where they're discriminated against in terms of freedom of movement.
This is not the discussion. This is
Excuse
not the
me,
discussion. You are talking about something.
It is a discussion because what the hoax is that these people waving keys of houses that no longer exist, as if their great-grandchildren will one day return to their homes, which are probably under 14 feet of concrete at the moment, 14 stories of concrete at the moment. That's just a myth. And it's a myth that's being perpetuated to perpetuate the animosity against Israel. If what was at stake, if you really want to understand the conflict and the difference between the Jews and the Arabs in this case, look at the way the two nations treat their refugees. Tel Aviv is a city created for refugees, as a refugee city created for refugees by refugees.
Talking about the African, the Jews embrace
the refugees and convert them into constructive, contributing members of society. The Arabs keep their refugees, or so-called refugees, as pawns, political pawns, to perpetuate. It's not. So how come they're still refugees?
This is a lie. Are you talking about the African refugees in Tel Aviv at the moment? They are being held in concentration camps and shipped back to Africa. What are you talking about, man? Just go to Tel Aviv.
Do me a favor.
Go to the central station. People are sleeping on the streets, man.
What you're talking about is illegal immigrants. You're talking about illegal immigrants.
I'm talking about politically persecuted people. I'm talking about African refugees. Please don't. I mean, come on, man. Let's get serious here. And again, please stop.
So your argument is that Israel is not an immigrant society.
Guys.
So your argument is that Israel is not an immigrant.
So Rami, here's what I want to find out. What steps in regards to this refugee process do you think are realistic steps that can be taken forward? And there's a lot of different, things to solve here with this conflict, but in regards to refugees, ultimately we had some people on earlier today that were talking about, having a designated, location inside of Israel for a certain number of refugees to be able to live in and be able to kind of populate that area. It would be a long-term sort of, plan to allow refugees in slowly into the country.
Well, Martin said something that I agree with Martin on the conclusion. I just don't agree on the reasons that led him to this conclusion. He said something regarding a survey being held within refugees populations in the Arab countries or Europe or whatever. And he said that most of them want to be absorbed, or part of them want to be absorbed within their local population. They're exiled, really. So let's let them decide. I actually support that. Let's let them decide.
Sure, I agree with you. Let them decide, but they're not allowed to decide. They're not being allowed to decide. They're not being allowed to decide.
Martin, let me
quote you. Or roughly quote you.
Martin, let Rami finish his point, and then you'll go ahead and share your idea. Go ahead, Rami.
So, like I said before, I agree with you on that point. Let them decide, okay, and let them have the right for self-determination in Palestine or wherever they want it. I lost my point because you interrupted me and I just didn't write it down. So I guess you can go on.
Go, Martin.
Well, that's the whole point. They're not being allowed to decide. They're not being allowed to decide. There was an interview several years ago in the LA Times with the spokesman of the Arab League, and he was questioned on the issue of ethnic discrimination against Palestinians in the Arab world. And I'm quoting almost verbatim now. I haven't got it in front of me, but if I'm quoting almost verbatim. He said, "Yes, we know that the Palestinians are living in difficult conditions, but that is to preserve their identity." And he went on and said, "If we allowed every Palestinian to accept or to attain the citizenship of the country that he was living in, there'd be no one to go home to Palestine," which proves my point exactly. The people who are guarding the issue of Palestinian nationality most zealously are not the Palestinians, but the Arab brethren who are using them as political pawns. And you really have to be gullible to believe anything else.
I don't support the way Palestinians are being treated in the Arab countries. I actually know a Palestinian that his whole money was stolen from the bank, and he's a Palestinian, and because he was living in Saudi Arabia, they weren't able to retrieve his money because he was a Palestinian. So I really don't support Arab regimes. I don't support the way Palestinians are being treated in the Arab world, and I don't know why you keep taking us to that place. When I said a bunch of times, I don't like how Arab regimes really behave and how they really try to solve and resolve the Palestinian issue. But you're forgetting one thing. We talked about refugees before. You're forgetting one thing. I'm also a Palestinian, and I have friends in exile. I have family in exile, and I talk to them. And I know for a fact that most of them do want to practice the right for return and do want to come back to this country. So again, we go back to the very, very simple equation that says no justice, no peace. Create justice, give people what they want, you will have peace.
Well, it depends, Rami, where you start measuring justice from. You see, the way I look at it was that the Arabs tried to eliminate the Jews. They lost the war, and justice means that they must pay the penalty for their actions. And part of the penalty of losing a war is that people get displaced. Hundred millions of refugees have been displaced by violence over the years. The only refugee problem that hasn't been solved for 6 or 7 decades is the Palestinian problem. That's the only one that hasn't been solved. All the other refugee problems have been solved within a generation. The Palestinian problem hasn't been solved simply because the Arabs do not want it to be solved. They're using it very effectively, by the way, and in my opinion, the Israeli government is behaving very incompetently in contending with the problem. They're using this problem merely as a political tool against Israel. If people wanted to solve the problem from a humanitarian point of view, there would be no problem whatsoever.
Rami, Martin, the only humanitarian point of view is again to let the refugees decide for themselves what they want. And this is the only humanitarian point of view. I just wanna go back to what you said before. You keep saying words like eliminate, like kill, like demolish. It's a very harsh terminology, and when you use it, this is how Israeli officials speak. If you remember the speech.
Excuse me.
This is how Israeli officials.
Do you want me to quote Arab leader time and time again? It was Ahmed.
Let me finish, please.
Go ahead, Rami. Finish your point.
I was saying that this is a scare tactic. Nobody wants to annihilate the Israeli population. Again, don't go to Ahmadinejad. Don't go to all the lunatics out there in the universe. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about Palestinians. Don't go there. Let's keep it local.
Rami, can I ask you a question?
Okay.
Rami, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's actually a question just to both of you. I mean, isn't it just kind of silly at this point? Like, to be talking about the rhetoric that comes from each side? I mean, like, can't they both be accused of using harsh terminology against one another? You know, isn't it kind of safe to say that there are, you know, heavy right-wingers in the Israeli government, and there are, you know, that, you know, have political representation in Israel, and there is, then there are groups like Hamas that can easily be accused of having, you know, just very obscene and radical terminology, and violent terminology towards one another. Isn't it like safe to say that you've got, you know, people on both ends just kind of potentially misrepresenting objective, balanced individuals such as both of you? I mean, you seem to be each, you know, having a pretty valuable discussion, whereas, you know, you have two parties in Israel, one on the Israeli side, one on the Palestinian side, that will not even, you know, sit at a table with one another, probably due to these different scare tactics. Do either of you agree with those statements? And I guess, Ram, you could go first.
Yeah. When I say scare tactics, I don't talk about the Palestinian side. I only talk about the Israeli side. Okay, Palestinians don't use scare tactics because they are already scared. Every Palestinian go through checkpoint. Every Palestinian see aircraft, see walls, see Israeli soldiers, smells tear gas, cries from tear gas. So they're not. There's no need for them to be, you know, to use scare tactics because they're already scared. And again, I just wanna you made like a comparison between the Israeli government and the Palestinian party Hamas. I don't think it's fair to compare the oppressor and the oppressed, and how their terminology. I mean, if the oppressor, with all of its big army and, you know, democratic regime, uses this terminology, then I think they are using scare tactics. But when you have Hamas, who are occupied and talking about resistance and how to resist occupiers and how to lift people's spirits up, then sometimes they do use harsh terminology, which I don't agree with. I never agree with Hamas terminology. But you have to remember they are still occupied and they are under siege. So of course they're gonna say that. I mean, just to give you one quick example from history, Nelson Mandela, who I think Martin also shares my appreciation for this man, for this great man, also started his way in a violent struggle. Nowadays,
okay, well, let me say the following. I think it's very objectionable to raise the issue of the wall as an implement of oppression. The wall was built for one reason: to stop the carnage in Israeli streets when Israelis were being blown up time and time again. And Arik Sharon came out with his, in my opinion, inappropriate statement that restraint is strength. And time again, and it was only when there was the horrific attack in Netanya at the at the Passover dinner that public opinion forced him to construct the wall. So the Palestinians brought the wall upon themselves. That's justice. The wall is justice. I mean, I'm not a great fan of the wall, but the Palestinians took the wall upon themselves. Now, there's a total asymmetry here. I challenge anyone to find the most extreme Israeli leader to use the kind of language that mainstream Palestinian leaders use. If you, not only the Hamas charter, which talks about Islam striking down Israel as it struck down all its previous its previous enemies, and why Islam can never accept Israel because of its Jewish character, and how redemption will only come when the Muslims harm the Jews and murder them to the last person. Even look at the allegedly pragmatic Fatah constitution, which talks about eliminating the Zionist entity in every aspect: cultural, Martin, economic, military. No, so there's absolutely no asymmetry. It's not scare tactics. Now, when you talk about threats against Israel, wasn't it Abdul Nasser who talked about before the Six-Day War about the Arab armies entering Israel with its ground not covered in sand but saturated in blood? That was Nasser. What occupation was he fighting? When Ahmed Shukeri said the hour of liberation of the homeland has come, before there was even any significance to the word of settlements or occupation, because all the territory was under Arab control, under the Jordanian control. What homeland was he going to eliminate? When Assad talked about annihilating Israel in '67, and the Iraqi president Saddam Hussein's predecessor talked about the hour of annihilation has come. So it's not scare tactics. They meant it. People were digging mass graves in Tel Aviv before the outbreak of the Six-Day War. So to try and dismiss Arab threats of annihilation as scare tactics is completely deceptive.
But these are not threats of annihilation. These are just war talks that you make it into like a big...
Oh, they were really the Arab government, the Arab armies, weren't mobilized to attack Israel. And you talk about Gaza and the poverty. Jewish philanthropists committed millions to set up the high-tech greenhouses. So what did the Arabs of Gaza do? They trampled them and distorted them. If Gaza wanted to be a model of prosperity and stability with cooperation of Israel, there'd be no problem. There'd be no problem. People with my views would be marginalized in Israel.
I'm sorry, Martin, that Arabs, same as Europeans, same as Israelis, want their rights. I'm sorry, but this is how they behave. And this is why the Gaza people still resist Israel, because they are not given their rights. And you said something about annihilating the Zionist.
Why didn't they operate the greenhouses?
Martin, I only have 3 or 4 minutes. I really have to go.
Okay.
Let me just comment one quick comment about. I can go on and on about what you said recently, but I just want to say one last thing. You talked about Zionism. You said one sentence that Fatah believes Zionism should be annihilated. I'm sorry to say, I'm very, very sorry to say, but I've never supported Zionism. To me, Zionism is as dangerous as fascism. It's a very, very racist movement. It's a very racist movement. It's a very, very racist idea. It's a very imperialist and colonial idea. And
the very fact that you can say that in Israel, the very fact that you can say that in Israel undermines your claim that it's fascist.
Rami, what I was going to say is, I think, honestly, I think the topic of, the term Zionism and different people's interpretations of it can be a whole nother Vonvo that we can cover, another time. And so what I was going to say to you is, would you mind just kind of, you only have a few minutes, why don't you put together kind of your concluding remarks, really what you'd like to kind of see occur going forward, right now. You kind of hinted at it earlier with, bringing together the different governments. Is there any other items you'd want to address or, throw out there to Martin to address? Because, if you need to conclude, that's fine.
You want to start with me or Martin?
Martin, you could go ahead because Rami just spoke. Any concluding remarks or other additional steps that you think need to be taken right now towards a solution to this conflict past the refugees concept which you brought up earlier?
Well, as I said before, there will be no solution, no matter what solution you advocate, one-state solution, two-state solution. And people are beginning to realize this, unless you disperse the Palestinian refugee problem.
Martin, when you say disperse, do you think, are you meaning like, get rid of that problem or disperse, Palestinian refugees throughout Israel? Can you be a little bit more specific what you mean by disperse the refugee problem?
By disperse, I mean that they should be given citizenship of the country of residence that they've been living in for decades. That's what I mean. I think that all the funding that's been given to UNRWA should be given to Arab governments to help them absorb these people into their society, on condition that they absorb them into their society, of course. And I think that the issue of the fierce discrimination against Palestinians in Arab countries is something that should be addressed by the international community. As for the Palestinians, the non-Israeli, I'm not talking about the Israeli citizens like Rami. He's a citizen. He can spread his ideas. If Israel really was such a fascist country, he would never be able to propagate the ideas that he's propagating now with impunity. But as far as
I was arrested twice for my ideas.
Not for your ideas. I don't know why you were arrested. You were arrested, but they were not for your ideas.
Two Israeli friends who share my exact ideas, both of them are Jews, were arrested with me.
Well, as far as I know, Israel is the most one of the most free countries for expressing ideas. Even the newspaper like Haaretz probably adopts the Palestinian narrative far more than adopts the Zionist narrative. So as a country where Arabs function as high court judges, as senior police officers, as senior members in the police force, that are treated with complete equality in hospitals, etc., etc. I happen to live between two Arab villages. I eat breakfast with Arabs. We discuss politics. We don't often agree. So to try and label the reality in Israel as anyway approaching fascism is completely absurd. And as far as the non-Israeli Palestinians living within Judea and Samaria and eventually Gaza, because Gaza will eventually implode, I think that there should be a huge effort, both on from the international community and from the Israeli government, to help them emigrate and better lives elsewhere on an individual basis, not through some Palestinian organization, but to approach individual Palestinian breadwinners and family heads, and offer them the possibility of extricating themselves from the cruel, corrupt, and cynical cliques that have been ruling their lives for years.
Great. Rami, go ahead and make any respond to anything, or obviously conclude with some things you'd like to see going forward.
Well, obviously, Martin and I don't really agree on the fact that Israel being a fascist state, and I think that the field shows otherwise. You said something about the wall. There was a necessity to secure Israel's safety. Well, this wall has ended Palestinian lives, and this wall has contributed nothing to Palestinian safety. People say that now Palestinians don't go and bomb buses in Tel Aviv because now you have that wall, but this is inaccurate, sir. Palestinians don't go and bomb buses because Israel has been assassinating every Palestinian activist out there, and it doesn't matter if they were non-violent or violent ones. So this is why this happened, and this is regarding the wall. And like I said before, Israel is a fascist state, and the fascism in Israel is rising. Just look at who won the last political elections in Israel. The political parties who won. The right wing is in charge again in Israel, and it will be in charge for the next years. Like just to sum things up, I'm not gonna talk a lot. I'm just gonna, like I said before, I'm gonna just sum things up and repeat my idea for a solution. As a Palestinian, and now I'm gonna talk about ourselves. As maybe we're not being portrayed right in Western media, or not being portrayed at all. Like I gave that mention of four Palestinian citizens killed by Israeli troops in the last month, and Martin didn't know anything about it, and I'm sure Max didn't either. And this is wrong, and this is not the kind of thing being shown in Western media, and it should be shown in order for people to really know the truth. And I'm going to talk about Palestinians. As a Palestinian, it really, really hurts when you see how Hamas bash not Israel, how they bash the Fatah and the PLO, and how it happens, and vice versa. And I think that in order for us to go on with the struggle, I'm not talking about peace negotiations. I'm not talking about talking with Israel. I'm talking about talking amongst ourselves. The biggest success of the Israeli struggle against Palestinians, or call it the Israeli assault on Palestinians, the past 120 years, was the divide and rule that happened in 2005, when Hamas took charge in Gaza, and they were able to isolate the West Bank and isolate the Gaza Strip. And I think this thing is harming us. If it's going to continue for the coming years, there will be no chance of us Palestinians being united. And at the end, and I'm sure people such as Martin will also understand that if the Palestinians are not united and they don't feel they speak in one voice, Israelis will suffer at the end, because when people feel that they are cornered, they really start acting like cornered individuals act, which is the results we see, like on the siege on Gaza. So to sum things up, I think we need to resolve our issues. Palestinians need to talk and resolve our issues, in spite of the fact Israel, and then we can proceed and move forward.
Okay, great.
But by the way, I agree that Palestinians shouldn't be cornered, which is why I think they should be offered an alternative to build their lives elsewhere and free from their failed and corrupt leadership at the moment.
Okay.
Well, do you know? We're ending this discussion and we both agree on something.
All right. Well, guys, great. Thank you so much for joining me here. I think our viewers who are watching, really enjoyed the discussion. So, once again, thanks so much for your time. Rami, congratulations on, being an uncle.
Thank you.
And Martin, thank you so much for your time. Out of, I'm sure, your busy day, to have your first Vonvo. I hope you enjoyed your experience. And Rami, this was a little bit more toned down, I hope, from last time. So, thank you so much for both of your insights. This was great.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. Have a good night. I really enjoyed this. Bye-bye.
Thank you to both of you.
Good night, Martin. Good night, Max. Bye.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.